All right, so let's start with this next session here. We're going to be talking about educating the next generation about Bitcoin. And I guess there's only one person to have this fireside chat with, and it's Samantha. So why don't you start with a quick introduction first?
Sure. So I'm Samantha Waal. I'm a kid, as you can obviously see. I'm 13 years old, and I've lived my whole life as a Bitcoiner.
Awesome. And I think there's a very fascinating fact about you, which is that you were born after Bitcoin was started, right?
Yeah.
So you have a block height.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. I'm jealous. All right. So I'm Arnold. I work for My First Bitcoin. We are a non-profit education organization based in El Salvador. We taught 30,000 students from our open source Bitcoin workbook, and we're expanding to like a lot of different new countries now. And one of the fun things is that I think we have a lot in common, because like work with Bitcoin education, you are part of that generation. We both went to El Salvador. We went to a graduation of an educational project, and yeah, we travel as well. So, but maybe first to start with a little bit of context, just so the audience know what is it to be 13 years old. And I was wondering, for example, did you ever use a physical map in your life before for navigation?
I haven't used it outside of school. I've used it in school to learn what it was like to use it back then and stuff, but I've never used it for navigation outside of school.
And how about reading newsletters?
I've done that because my grandpa still reads the newsletters.
Okay, did you send SMS messages?
Yeah, I
Okay.
have.
Feature phones, do you know about the pre-smartphone?
I didn't know what it was for a while, but I've never had one. But now I know what it is.
Cool. And what else do we have? Like the telephone line, like the one that you physically pick up from?
Never used that.
No? Okay, so there's clearly something in the next generation that doesn't know about a lot of things, but they do know about Bitcoin. So I was wondering, can you tell a little bit about how is it to be a Bitcoiner, 13-year-old, with all your friends? What do you tell them? How do you educate people about Bitcoin?
It really depends on the person, honestly. So I usually try to match my friends' interests when I try orange pilling them. And if it's a stranger that I don't know, I try to get as many clues of who they are by the way either that they dress or the way that they talk or where they work. And I try to find something that will pique their interest in Bitcoin, that will first give them like a first glimpse into Bitcoin so they can then expand their view after that.
And what does resonate the best with the Generation Z or Gen B, Generation Bitcoin? Is it like a specific angle that you look at Bitcoin? Maybe it's not the monetary part, or not like I hate governments and I hate banks, but like what do you tell people?
So with other kids, I usually first tell them about inflation and if they even know what that is, because a lot of my friends obviously want to buy the new like Nintendo Switch game or the new Xbox game, and they need pocket money for that. And the games are getting more expensive by now, and they realize that, and they have to save more, and that's not something they like. That's something they all share in common. So that's usually how I introduce it to them first, inflation.
Got it. How did you actually get introduced to Bitcoin? Because I know your dad is here in the front row, so he plays a role in that, but I think there's more.
I never really got introduced to it, I'd say. I just kind of grew up with it. For a while as a kid, I would even say I thought it's normal everywhere and that everyone uses it everywhere. I couldn't even tell the difference between Euro and Bitcoin and other currencies. I just knew in Germany, my mom uses Euro, my dad uses Bitcoin, and that's what I can use. So I only later found out that I can only use Euro in shops.
So like there is some ancient technology and the future technology. So you could say that Bitcoin is just like the internet. It's always been there. It's like oxygen. If you need it, it's there. If you need it and it's not there, you maybe start to miss it. But it's like very normal.
Yeah, it's pretty standard.
So I think in general you have visited more conferences than most people here. Maybe also did more Lightning payments to just buy things, whether it's here in Arnhem or other places.
Possibly.
Can you tell a little bit about how it is just to be buying all your daily stuff with Bitcoin?
So obviously, I don't buy all my daily stuff with Bitcoin because I unfortunately can't yet, but I buy as much as I can with Bitcoin. For example, my dad gives me my pocket money in Bitcoin. I don't get that in euro or whatever. I actually only use euro when it's at the mall or in a shop. And even when I'm at the mall or in a shop, I first look at Bitrefill if they have any like gift cards for the shop that I'm going to go into.
All right, so you mentioned you got pocket money in Bitcoin, which I think is awesome. And we always say that Bitcoin is permissionless, it's for everyone. But then I'm wondering, is it really for everyone? Because I think you need, for example, to be 18 in order to open an account in an exchange. So, like, how can you get access to Bitcoin as a 13-year-old girl?
I'd say with that, it's a problem on the bank side, on the bank sides, though, that you can't open an exchange with 13 years old because you have to have a bank account or like PayPal account or whatever to be able to transfer your money so that you can get Bitcoin back. And that's a problem on the bank side that I can't open a bank account with 13. I usually, for getting my Bitcoin, I either give my dad some euro, who then gives that to my mom because he doesn't hold on to euro, and he gives me some Bitcoin back. Or, for example, when last week when I was at Paranelli, they have like a really nice ATM for just putting some euro in and getting some Bitcoin sent to your like Lightning wallet.
Cool. One other way of getting Bitcoin as a kid could be to play games, for example. So there are a couple of options like Thunder Games, Zebedee, and you just earn Bitcoin with micropayments. Is that something that you do and you see other, like maybe friends? Do you have friends from school?
I've played Thunder Games, I've played Zebedee games. For example, Bitcoin Bounce, that's probably the one I play most, and it's fun, and that's also something I usually do to orange pill my friends first. I just tell them like, hey, or even I don't even tell them the stuff. I just play the game in front of them, and then they like look at my screen and like ask me what it is, or I tell them, hey, I'm playing this game. Do you also want to play with me?
So basically, what you do, you download an app, start playing a game, you take sats out, and then you go to a place to spend your Bitcoin again with the money you earned playing a game. That's right.
Yeah, my favorite place is actually a bakery. I like live more in an outskirts of a place, and then there's like a city. I live like more in a village off to the side. I usually then ask my dad if we can drive into the city so I can like go spend my Bitcoin at the bakery there because they have really good stuff.
That's awesome. So we're at adopting Bitcoin, and this is like maybe the core of adopting Bitcoin as a payment method. But there is also a part, how do we get there? So how do you talk to all your friends and classmates if you want to explain about Bitcoin? What resources do you use? Because for me personally, I had years where I always recommended podcasts and like the Bitcoin Standard, but I suppose you have different resources that I don't even know about.
I usually recommend them either Bitcoin books that I can also then lend to them and they give me back, or I tell them like, hey, you know, I'm like kind of semi-famous. Like I've been on a stage before. That's kind of cool, right? Do you want to watch like one of my videos? Which they immediately say yes to because kids my age, if one of my classmates were on stage, I'd happily watch them no matter what. And then I'd also probably get interested into the topic.
Got it. Which books do you share with them?
I have quite a few that I share, but I think the one I probably do most is that I probably share most is A Tale of Bitville. It's basically a story about kids, and they trade. Like for example, a kid will mow your They will cut your grass. I forgot how to call it now. And another kid gives you lemonade for it, and that's kind of fun. But then the grass is short, and they don't eat that anymore. So what do? A cool kid comes, or a cool person comes, Satoshi Nakamoto, and introduces them to Bitcoin.
That's great. And this is something that I would actually share with the whole audience here, is that I think and I believe that we are living in a bubble with adults where we create books for us. We write books, we make podcasts, we make resources, but not for the next generation. And that's the one that's maybe like people like you should know about Bitcoin, and there's not much out there. So
personally, I'm also kind of passionate about writing. I've always liked the subject English in school. So sometimes when I can't find a good book for my classmates' interests or for what they'd be reading, I just like write kind of a short story myself. And I have quite a few of those like saved in my notes. If I'd scatter through my notes, you'd probably find like 4 to 5 different Bitcoin kind of short stories.
Do you also have some experience with Bitcoin education in your classes on school, or is everything outside of that?
Sadly, they don't teach us anything about Bitcoin in school, but at my last school, not the one I'm currently at, but my last school, it was a private school, and we once had a teacher specifically walk in and tell us, like, at the end of the presentation, like, oh yeah, and you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and you got to be careful, like, AI is going to take over the world into the future, and then there's this, like, this Bitcoin thing, it's super shady, don't, like, ever touch it, and my classmates were all immediately looking at me, and I confidently told the teacher that she's wrong.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, and I think there's actually a lot of value to include Bitcoin in classes on schools. We do it with my first Bitcoin in El Salvador, but just think about how we have physics classes. We could implement Bitcoin easily, history easily, things like computer science. That's where Bitcoin fits in, and like there are many more classes.
I'm currently at a German school, and thing with the German schools, unfortunately, they basically have a set curriculum where they can of course add their own stuff in. Like, I don't think it's that strict. I haven't researched too much about it yet, but they basically, whenever I try to throw in a suggestion for, hey, maybe you could do this different because I used to be at a private school and this was kind of more fun and stuff, they usually just say, no, this is my set curriculum. I've always done it like that. It's in the book like that. I've done it back like this back in 1988 or something, and I feel like we're learning stuff for like ancients, as if we'd live in the 1990s. Like, we're trying to run a 2008 program on like computer from the 1990s that like always break. And I've been telling my school, like, I know you're not like really the richest school, but maybe you could get like newer laptops or like newer computers, but they just refuse to.
So we're actually failing to educate the next generation, specifically about Bitcoin.
Well, there's always, of course, books and websites that kids can still, of course, read upon, but I'd say usually society makes it seem like Bitcoin is this shady thing you shouldn't get into, and then parents also tell their kids, oh, stay away from that, and kids will obviously listen to their parents when their parents also don't know any better.
I think this is a nice bridge towards the second thing that we want to talk about, which is we both visited El Salvador.
Yep.
You went twice, I went a couple of times as well. And we both went to a graduation on a high school, a public school in El Salvador. And maybe just some more context. In El Salvador, of course, Bitcoin is a legal tender. It's accepted as like money there. And because of that, a whole educational program is started. And with my first Bitcoin, we are part of that. So a couple of times a year, we organize graduations where Bitcoin from all over the world can come to El Salvador. You've been there, I've been there. And we are verifying how students are doing in the public school system with Bitcoins. They attended a 10-week class program, and it's a workbook, 170 pages. And then at the end, you verify as like a Bitcoiner at this school with the local kids how their Bitcoin knowledge is. And can you share something about that day or the experience?
So I was there for only a day to see other kids graduate. I think they had like a really nice kind of vibe going on there. They had like, of course, beautiful like Bitcoin stickers everywhere. And I even saw like a kid sketching something about Bitcoin, but I can't quite remember what it was. There was some food you could buy with Bitcoin. And then I helped verify students later on in the day. I gotta say that wasn't the best experience for me because she spoke zero English. My Spanish is very broken. I can speak some, but it's very broken. And it was kind of hard to even communicate. But then in the end, she figured it out with a little of my help, and I even just sent her a tip because she was kind of a sweet girl that didn't really know how to do this.
I recognize that as someone who speaks a little bit of Spanish. But what we do at the graduation is that there are 4 steps that all the students have to prove their knowledge. And the first one is to receive Bitcoin payments. The second one is to send over Lightning. The third one is to restore a wallet, like an on-chain wallet with seed phrases. And then they have to answer some questions about like who is Satoshi and like some basic questions. And 3 of the 4 steps you can do without Spanish, I think. So, and in general, what I think is awesome is that just the fact that 30,000 kids in El Salvador learned this already is phenomenal. And secondly, that I think we are all underestimating how powerful it is if so many kids your age, maybe a little bit older on those public schools, are really using Bitcoin on a daily basis.
Especially something with kids, though. In kids, it really spreads, I think, more than in adults, because when a kid finds out something, they're eager to like show that they have knowledge. They're eager to tell their friends, hey, I learned this cool thing, and then they tell their parents and their family, and then it spreads from friend to friend to friend until it like spreads out even wider.
And they can orange pill their parents.
And hopefully over the whole world, yeah.
Yeah. So what I noticed being at the graduation, and maybe you did as well, is that for the people in El Salvador, especially the kids, it's so special to see Bitcoiners coming to their place, because it used to be unsafe, coming to their school in their local community, so not to the touristy places, but to their place, their school, their classroom, to check what they've been doing with Bitcoin. And what I sensed is it's so powerful for them to see that they're like at the front line of changing not only the country, but like many more things. And yeah, if you ever plan to go to visit El Salvador, try to join one of those graduations, because if you ask me, it's quite unique to be in this place. Like, where else could you be with kids in the school?
That's something I find about teaching kids, though. You got to make them feel proud, and you got to make them feel happy of their accomplishments if they want to like be able to like keep doing it. Because if you just put them down and say, oh no, you still have this and this and this to learn, they're never going to want to learn it anymore. If you then invite all these people, and if you go to their like graduation and stuff, they're going to be proud of their accomplishments, and they're going to happily orange pill more people because they'll think of it as a great thing.
Did you also have, at the end of the graduation, the national anthem?
I think so.
Because what I remember is that at that moment, when they just received their certificate, their name's on it, teacher's name, Bitcoin logo, and they sing the national anthem, that's the moment they're proud the most. And it's like really, Bitcoin brings hope, and it's empowering people, and they really see that in this moment.
You can feel the shockwaves in the air.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, maybe one step back. I think we have a couple of minutes. Yeah, we do. So all these kids, they learn about Bitcoin in their class, and there are a lot of different angles to look at Bitcoin. So one, like we just mentioned, the monetary part, maybe physics or computer science. Do you have special ways of explaining parts of Bitcoin that make it simple? Because, just to give you an example, I think we as Bitcoiners tend to use terminology that doesn't make sense. Like, we call things mining. But for the younger generation, we should maybe call it a raffle. Like that's so much more normal to suddenly you pick a number from a bag, and that's what mining is. And do you have more of those examples that you already use different words to explain the same things that all these boomers, including me, do?
So I wouldn't really say I have different words. I just think I say it more in a like kids cool way. I have to use like Generation Z slang, Gen Z slang, so that they understand what I'm trying to say. Because if I just use all this hard terminology, they're going to be bored by it and think, oh yeah, this is just like an old people thing or whatever. And me and my dad came up with this kind of cool idea to teach some kids about Bitcoin, is that we just make some kids have some stands, and then they all get a certain amount of money that they can like pay for, like for example, a lemonade, and you can buy some apples with it. My dad just kind of like throws in some more money during the time to make inflation go up, because you automatically see kids put their prices up when they see other people are getting richer than them because they want to be the richest. That's the ultimate goal, obviously.
I like this example because something that we use in the school system in El Salvador is an activity to explain fractional reserve banking. Like how the hell do you explain that to kids? But there are actually fun ways to show how this system does not work and how Bitcoin can solve it. So for example, let's say I have a bike, I give it to you, and you promise me to give it back. That works. But then you're going to give this bike, you promise 10 of your friends, like, yeah, I have a bike now, you can use it whenever you want. So basically, my bike is always in someone else's possession, and when I ask you to give it back to me, you don't have it anymore. And this is just a very simple example how we have one bike, but 1,000 promises for someone to give back the bike to you. And we take out all the complex stuff, like money and banks and like how this works with debit, credit, etc. And we just make it very simple to explain what problem Bitcoin is solving. And this is just one example. And like I think we can come up with many more of these creative ideas.
To put that in simple words for kids, something like that I'd usually explain as you have to be careful who you trust and how much you trust them.
Ooh, don't trust, verify.
Exactly.
We have a couple more minutes, and we're wondering some more questions from the audience, maybe to Samantha or to me. But I think she has a lot of interesting things to share.
It's a really simple question. I just wondered if you would ever think about putting some of them short Bitcoin stories together and publishing something, that we could all use to educate our own children.
Me and my brother were already thinking with like my mom and my dad that we're probably going to, in the near future, which could mean like a month or which could mean 5 years. We are not quite sure yet. We wanted to like make kind of a little Bitcoin comic for kids where I maybe illustrate and my brother tries and show off some of his writing skills.
Create more resources for the younger generation, created by the younger generation. That's awesome. Anyone else? Kamal?
Yeah, question to Sam. You're a Bitcoiner. Do you save, and why? At your age?
I do save my money in Bitcoin rather than trading it because for me, I've never really understood the concept of trading. I mean, I understand the general basics and why people do it. But for me, it's more, why would I trade it for euro when in the future Bitcoin is going to be money that I can use anyways? So why not just keep it in Bitcoin instead of having to trade it around all the time?
Anyone else? Or do you have like another final statement? No? Okay, that's it.
Really.
Thank you, everyone.